Hey James, how's it going?
It's going great, Marty.
That's good to hear. Funny meeting you here in this parking lot again.
Yeah, the lighting's good.
Pretty good. A little overcast, so that's more your style, I think. But anyway, we're here to begin the great Midnight Radio project that I'm doing with you. For me, I frame the project in the general, idea of re-enchantment, so that we are thinking about how to make this disenchanted world re-enchanted once again. And I think about this in terms of primary naivete versus secondary naivete, which is the primary, you just are born into the world and it's already enchanted. And so you don't know the material causes of everything. You don't have concepts for everything. You don't have the ability to identify everything that's going on. You are a prediction machine that is not able to make very good and accurate predictions. But as we grow up, we become much better, and as we grow up as a society as well, we become much better at making predictions and eliminating unintended consequences.
Not as a society, though.
Not as a what?
Not as a society.
Yeah, maybe not a society, right? Yeah, good point. So, anyways, yeah. But part of what happens then is that as the world becomes more and more under our control, more and more identifiable, we lose the sort of enchanting, unknown ambiguity of things that aren't, quite a part of our intentional grasp. And so the secondary naivete is not a synthesis, but it includes both. It includes both the concepts, the ideas that we use to reduce uncertainty, but it also includes the ambiguity of things that, we are not able to conceptualize, that we are not able to control. So there's a little bit more indeterminacy in an enchanted, or at least in a re-enchanted world, I guess you could say. And so Midnight Radio kind of is this idea for something that I also found magical when I was young, in a primary naive way, which was I found the whole idea of a radio DJ selecting from some magic recipe book that I did not have access to, when there was a DJ who actually had some control and their entire repertoire wasn't already planned out, and uncertainty about what's going to go well and what's not going to go well wasn't totally reduced already by some kind of algorithm or whatever, so that we now have some enchantment. We now have some possibility of something happening that we don't understand right off the bat, something that we could hear that would help us to see or hear the world in a new way. And so that Midnight Radio slot was always for the guy who was going to throw something on that wasn't already a part of the deal. He just would be inspired and bring that thing in and throw it down. And how he found those things, we don't know. And so, for me, this is how I kind of see your Midnight Radio as a space of re-enchantment, as a way to try to get back some of what we lost with our more and more increasing control, especially over the things that we hear. Being able to hear something that we haven't before is less and less a possibility, or it doesn't resemble or isn't like, because of course the algorithm works on resemblances and averages. Look like you're ready to pop in there.
Yeah, but I was waiting for you to.
Oh, right, yeah. So no, please. Yeah, I was at a stopping place. Yeah.
I'm delighted that you think the Midnight Radio project has anything to do with enchantment. That was definitely not my thought at the beginning, but. And I am grateful to you for making me do these videos, which is something that was unthinkable for me even a few months ago. And I just realized there's a strange irony here. So,
which is?
I'm going to warm up to it. I started Midnight Radio almost exactly 2 years ago when I was really frustrated with my creative life. I had all these half-finished novels and essays and ideas for music and just couldn't seem to finish any of them. And I remember Candy at the time was going through a heavy Taoist phase. And
cool.
Yeah. And she came out of her room one night and said something very Taoist about just doing what you already naturally do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized I had been really gnawing at my soul, trying to be a certain type of writer or a certain type of person, you know. And also I was like, I don't read long form essays. I'm not sure about the fate of the novel. I still believe in it, but I don't know if I'm that guy either. And then I just thought about what I naturally do.
Yeah.
Like, what do I do on my own when nobody's looking, when Candy's gone to bed around midnight? And I realized I like to just play with music, drench it in reverb, slow things down, and then just write little notes about the state of my soul.
Yeah.
And so I decided, okay, I'm going to do that. And then my mind went to, for the first time in a long time, to high school when I first discovered this DJ, the Electrifying Mojo, who was a Detroit DJ, super mysterious. And this is where I'm coming up to the irony, which is, I was like, that guy probably influenced me more than anybody in a lot of ways. Where 15, 16, I was listening to a lot of hip hop or whatever was going on back in the mid 90s. And one night I'm just tuning the radio dial, and then I come across this low baritone voice. And he's saying things like, you know, if you're in your car, I want you to flash your headlights, and all these things while the Star Wars theme is playing in the background. And then suddenly he would just drop into Kraftwerk. It was the first time I ever heard Computer World. And then some like 30-minute version of Flashlight or whatever it was. And you could not predict what he was going to play next.
Yeah.
And I caught the tail end of his career. I mean, he started DJing. He came out of the mothership in the 70s when Parliament was playing around Michigan at Funkadelic. And he's like Bigfoot. They're like these blurry photographs of him. People know
cool.
that he came from Arkansas.
Wow.
Every year he would win like best DJ in Detroit from the Metro Times and Orbit, which I guess that's probably not around anymore. And he would never show up to get the award, but he worked like a myth, like this sort of thing that was almost just totally word of mouth. And I caught the tail end of his career. You know, a lot of people credit him with sort of laying the groundwork for what became like Detroit electro and techno by playing a synthesis of Kraftwerk, Devo, then, you know, a lot of like 70s black soul and funk and so on. And you can see all that DNA in the first records by like Cybertron or whoever. So he didn't follow any specific format, and he never cut to commercial if he didn't feel like it. And then he just got bumped further and further down the dial until he ended up at 107.5, a lot of gold, a lot of soul. They played basically nothing but Luther Vandross and Anita Baker during the day, but at night, Electrifying Mojo would come on. And he would say, you know, if you're in your car, I want you to flash your lights. And I remember driving down Woodward and seeing this car flash its lights, and I did the same. And I was like, man, this voice is just drawing everybody into a brotherhood, you know? And so there was this relationship with this voice on the radio. The irony being, I really don't like the sound of my voice, and I hate the idea of being photographed.
Oh, I see. That's
and now here I am. So, and so then I just was thinking, like, I want something that has that energy. And then the other thing too with Midnight Radio is obviously techno, which Mojo's show would end erratically. And sometimes he would recite poetry, like from the Mental Machine is what I called it, and you know, share his thoughts on politics or violence or whatever it was. But you could tell there was like this really human heart on the other end. You know, like every song he played, you knew was coming from a very particular consciousness. And then when he would finally sign off, it would cut to a program called Deep Space Radio.
Nice. Sounds good.
And I can't remember exactly who was involved, but I know Kevin Saunderson was, Derek May, maybe, but a lot of the heavy, big budget Detroit techno guys. And I'm like 15 or 16 just staring at my radio at midnight on a Friday, and it's just making all these beeps and bloops, which, you know, when I finally heard DBX, beep, boop. But I just really thought it was like future music. I didn't know what it was, you know. And then finally one night I snuck out and went to St. Andrews Hall and went to the top floor and heard Basic Channel's Philips track for the first time, and that just changed my life. So the impact of radio on me, that plus having that 120-minute Maxell cassette tape, riding the pause button to not get the click, And then I would start taking apart the tapes, with the jeweler's screwdriver and making little loops, So anyway, Candy's like, do what you already naturally do. And then I just thought about me being that 16-year-old kid hunched over a Maxell tape, and just all the crazy thoughts and murk that kind of happen when you're working on something like that. So that became Midnight Radio, where I just started with like 5 tracks every 2 weeks. And I had to make a schedule. So the 1st and 15th of the month, every other deadline in my life sails by. But for 2 years, I've not missed a deadline yet, no matter what time zone I am in. So that's the Midnight Radio project.
So that's your praxis.
That's
We'll say a little bit more about that, but I mean, the thing I kind of enjoy about this is like you have the tale of the primary naivete, the Edenic, electrifying mojo, who had this sort of like firstness where you are introduced to something that you didn't completely understand, and you enjoyed not understanding it all the way, and the ambiguity, the brotherhood of other people who also were a part of this sort of like we don't know what's going to happen sort of a thing. And isn't this fun? And it is fun. That's the way we should be in the world. Yeah. But a playful way of being in the world. But that has clearly been lost by almost any possible way of finding out about music and new music now. So it's sort of like, there was this alchemical magic, and the recipes all got erased for a better chemistry, or chemistry for better living of the modern era, which is just like, this does this and that does that, and then we just, work the, identities of the chemicals and, make these things happen or whatever. But we're talking about going back to a sort of what I would call an alchemistry that includes, some of like what we know about the, development of chemistry or modern life or whatever, but also helps us to learn how to make it, look at it new, make it more ambiguous, so that every track ever that we had to hunt and search for in the 90s had a certain mystery that was already built into it, because you just would have to overhear somebody playing it, or you'd have to go to the record store and maybe somebody pick it out for you or whatever, but you have to go through so much vinyl and listen to it. It was a search, and it was exciting or whatever, and you come up with a few gems or whatever. But now everything is available, including a lot of those underground records. I'm surprised what Shazam can find nowadays. Back to the time of DJs, soaking their labels, white label stuff. A lot of times was because it was illegal.
So obnoxious.
Well, a lot of times it was because it was illegal, and they didn't want the samples to get them in trouble or whatever. But yeah, no, I got you. Or Electrifying Mozo covering his face, or the Underground Resistance now. I don't know if they still do it, but covering their faces. I know Moody Man often puts like some kind of like pantyhose things on his face so that it's obscure or whatever.
Well, that was the whole ethos of techno for sure. I mean, those basic channel 12 inches that came out with that logo, you just saw that logo and you knew it was going to be great, but it could have come from anywhere.
Yeah, right.
I didn't know. Same thing with Plastic Man or Mike Inc., and so there was this sort of faceless quality to the music that was very different than I think any other genre that was so much about the image of the artist. And here, you had no idea who made it. Was it one guy? There's a couple people.
Or how they made it, too. That was part of the magic to me. I didn't know anything about drum machines, samplers, synthesizers. I was in the band when I was in junior high, I think. And, I saw instruments and they produced noises. And I saw how the, music teacher, orchestrated the whole thing, but I had no idea, or rock musicians, I knew what they were doing, but I had no idea, I had absolutely no idea how this was done, or what was the paradigm that they were even operating on.
And maybe I want to keep that mystery, because I have zero interest in gear whoring. I mean, I remember everybody what kind of 303 is Richie Houghton using? Or I'm like, for fuck's sake, who cares?
It's a 303, yeah. But anyways, yeah. But anyway, no, I know that's right. We want to keep that level of mystery. But let's say, all those things were disclosed to you as all that music is now readily available in ways that it just wasn't. How do you re-enchant? And so, one of the things I'm thinking about this re-enchantment project, is to make it interesting again by putting it in different locations, different places, spatially with regard to your writing and to the tracks, and to like putting in the reverb and the just like the spaciousness of the reverb and the echoiness of it, as well as just like it's a lot of like what sample-based music is, in the sense that you're putting things in a different juxtaposition with each other, so that's you're making a kind of enchantment out of pastiche or something like that. So anyway, let's just talk then directly about how you work your alchemy here. We'll kind of make it concrete by talking about the first episode.
All right. So the first episode, the first track is Stevie Wonder's "Jesus, Children of America." And I picked that solely because Electrifying Mojo played it all the time. It got me into Stevie Wonder. I still think it's his best song. And what's interesting is now in the rearview mirror, 2 years later, as we're talking about Enchantment, it occurs to me that that song is actually a document of Stevie Wonder's own kind of spiritual awakening.
Yeah, and which you're right about, which is how the writing matches up too.
So
it's cool.
Driving down the highway after a show in the middle of the night somewhere in Tennessee or something, and I'm sure a lot of us have the same nightmare of driving behind one of those like timber carriers, and the log just flies off the back of the truck and like goes to the windshield, puts Stevie Wonder in a hospital in a coma, and there's all those stories in writing about how he never thought he would be able to play music again, and and then eventually he said he got spiritualized, and so in that song, there's this very strange Christianity, I suppose, but also a lot of talk about transcendental meditation, talks about junkies and addiction and trying to transcend beyond the things that we do compulsively. And so, but I just picked that song specifically for that bass line because whenever it came on.
It's great.
But now in retrospect, I'm like, oh, that was a song all about re-enchantment. So.
Yeah, definitely. I like the religiosity there of that track, because it's talking about the sort of like, he's moved on to this sort of transcendental meditation bit, which is kind of like, just kind of like letting whatever there is come, kind of a thing. So it's a very inclusive sort of a kind of spirituality, perhaps. A
very 70s inclusive. I think transcendental meditation now, you have to pay money to get a mantra, and it's a whole annoying
yes,
thing. So.
Everything is ruined now. But I like just sort of like the
general spirit of it.
That's right. So, and I think that's the spirit of a good mixtape. That's the spirit of a good radio program. One of the things that a lot of people talk about the Electrifying Mojo is like his radical inclusivity. So that it was like a lot of time, people would turn into it for the funk and the soul or whatever, and then they'd get Kraftwerk or something like that, because he, was doing and introducing people to new things all the time.
So he was one of the first people to ever put Prince on the radio. And whenever Prince was in Detroit, he would do an interview with the Electrifying Mojo. There's some really cool bootleg mixes of that. Oh, Moody Man has a great track where he takes one of those recordings with Mojo and Prince.
Yes, I've heard it.
Yeah. He was really interested in this sort of fusion and this very polyglot approach to like music, and more of a mood than any sort of genre or specific concept, I suppose.
Yeah, as are you. So a lot of times in your mixes, there'll be little hints of things like that kind of float in through, like heavily slowed down and full of reverb, but like it has the quality of like this remembered thing, but remembered in a strange or weird way, so that you're kind of like, you talked about before, this strange sort of like practice. I mean, that's the point to me. It's like taking something that's a concept clear, you know how it is, it's all mapped out to the world or whatever, and then make it bizarre, make it unfamiliar, making the familiar unfamiliar.
So that gets us to episode 1, Stevie Wonder, Jesus, Children of America. Then the second track is Sugar Plant, which is just absolutely beautiful, roomy, Japanese dream pop, I suppose, from the mid-90s. I feel like they never got their due. But it truly sounds like falling asleep into a wonderful dream. Then what is it? Like something obvious. Oh, Suicide, Fuchsia, Michigan Space Rock. And Actress, Hubble, which again, in terms of mystery, when those 12 inches first came out, which was mid-2000s. It just said Thriller on it, and nobody knew who made it. And later it turned out it was an actress put it on his first album. But for a while there was that mystery, and it still is happening. I mean, Burial, well, I guess now people know who Burial is, but for a while there was that sort of mystery. And then even now with a lot of the stuff on the Ecstatic label, Romance is one of my favorite artists right now. Nobody knows who they are, and I think even just by calling themselves Romance.
Well done to them, for sure, for not going for the whole overexposure thing, which is like what most...
like doing a podcast about it or
right,
something.
yeah, what most people do. I mean, there is a way, as you kind of hinted at, of doing this sort of like hiddenness in a sort of obnoxious way. And then
true.
there is a way of or a precious way, let's just say. And then there's a way of doing it that is a part of the alchemical process, the blackening, if you will, where you double negate black to make it blacker than black or whatever. This is the negredo in the alchemical tradition. But anyways, so the idea here is like, we're thinking about how to do this artfully, skillfully, because it's one of these things where you are intending the unintentional. So you're working inside this paradox of like, how do I do this intentional thing that welcomes in what can't be intended? So how do I conceptualize? How does music? How do the lyrics of the music? How does the instrumentation? How does the sound? How does any of that stuff welcome in the unfamiliar through the familiar? And so, as a great example on your track list there was Suicide to me. So obviously, Suicide using very restrictive in many ways machinery. So just pretty dumpy, bad synthesizers and like really antiquated like drum machines that had all these pre-programmed beats on them. And then basically what they did is they just use them wrong, and then you get something psychedelic and very cool. So you get them singing what would you call it, bubblegum, like 50s, 60s rock and roll
like
type songs
the Phil
or whatever.
Spector mode.
Yeah,
Phil,
so
which is all
Motown.
about perfect, pristine production, and then Suicide is anything but. Right. So there's this interesting idea of like trying to mimic something and then doing absolutely what it's not, like what it was not intended for. Like Phil Spector is not intended to be played at some sleazy Max's Kansas City or whatever was going on in the 70s in New York. Right.
Well, there's also the idea with that too of it's not to make fun of it either. So that's another little trick that like our Generation X could fall on the wrong side of, which is like I can only enjoy things but ironically. So it's not like this is like I'm doing this in such a way to make it just a kind of joke. I'm doing it in a way that both honors it and undermines it at the same time.
Which I think is just then making a good faith effort. So I think there's two tracks here that we're following. One is about identity, right? Like nobody knows who the Electrifying Mojo is, or he was very anti recognition, right? And it makes me think about the state of art, especially over the past 10, 20 years, where the brand name artists like Marina Abramović or Ai Weiwei, I think that these artists are famous for who they are, their persona. Like, oh, Marina Abramović is opening a little school in upstate New York, or Ai Weiwei, like it was because of his blogging and more of like his persona against the Chinese government, which I'm not taking anything away from either of these artists, but it became more about who they were and less about one particular piece. And then entering into that, another big brand name artist would be Banksy, which I think is, again, actually playing with identity, right? Because it's, we don't know who he is, and that becomes his entire story. I think playing any of these games is just a dead end versus I'm just going to make a good faith effort to do what I want to do, right? And allow accidents to occur and, just to not intend to be known or unknown or intend for something to sound enchanted or mysterious or not enchanted, I think you just have to make a good faith effort. And the only way I've found to do that, and you've helped me a lot with this too, actually, but is to just follow a timeline. 1st and 15th. All right, good enough. It's got to go out. Steer into the skid, enjoy the little mistakes along the way, which I think gets into the second episode, which is called Death Prom.
Right.
And I only came across that term once in a Pitchfork review of one of my all-time favorite albums by Dirty Beaches called Badlands. And speaking of, he's definitely picking up the Suicide mantle, where he covers Francois Hardy and Serge Gainsbourg, and then I'm just spacing out the Ronettes. Oh yeah, Keep on Dancing. But it's basically like, it sounds like a guy just doing weird karaoke in hell. It has this darkness and this grittiness, and he sings his own lyrics over them, but he just loops a couple of these beats that you just know that sound like some sort of fever dream from the 50s or 60s. Anyway, like back when that came out, 2007 or 8, somebody said it sounds like an invitation to a death prom. And I've extensively looked, I'm like, that has to be a genre, because it's such a specific mood, which is this idea of something that's intended to be so innocent, intended to be like this significant moment in one's life, and then it goes bad. I mean, the movie Carrie, all these things that kind of play with that idea.
Yeah, it's the primary naivete versus the, deconstruction or the deterritorialization of the, the enchanting thing that you thought at some point, but then it becomes like, if anything, a secondary naivete that involves this, what I would call like the action of the metaphor, which is to set up a kind of clash between like the prom
when
and
David
death.
Lynch uses Blue Velvet, the Bobby Vinton song in Blue Velvet, or how he uses Paris Sisters and Mulholland Drive, that's the secondary naivete then, because he's using something that was intended or is thought of as innocent, upholding a certain set of intended values. And then putting it in a context
what's
where it starts
key here
to feel...
about the secondary naivete is that it involves both what can be conceptualized or what's familiar, and what is different or other, they're held together without resolution. There's probably some level of synthesis going on here, but it would be like a synthesis with a remainder. A remainder of irresolvable ambiguity that can't be brought in. So, like, one of the ways to think about this technique is where you have, we're starting with like this primary A equals A identity. This is that, whatever. But then we realize there's some way in which that concept, there's some way in which that identity doesn't fit. There's like this difference that like stands out, that's escaping from it or whatever. It's kind of like having an intention and then all the things that escape your attention that you cannot make intentional. So then you have the, you could either fall into just like a total nihilism, like nothing holds together, so there's a kind of contradiction that's just like, yeah, this just isn't true. So either the cat's on the mat or it's not. There's no in-between state. But there's a kind of way of thinking about like an in-between or a liminal space that where both things are holding them together. So in the death prom example, the prom is like this American institution, very idealized. It's like, something supposedly like I did not myself, but like a lot of kids dream about, their prom night or whatever. And like, it's got all this mythology around it or whatever. Hopefully at some point that gets a little bit demythologized. It's funny to get mythology, good mythology, you have to demythologize. You have to kind of undermine it at the same time that you promote it. So there's got to be some sense in which, the prom, I thought it was going to be this enchanting night, but it was really just this bullshit, disenchanting thing. All this and that and all this other kind of stuff went wrong. But when you get to the secondary naivete, it's like, no, all that stuff that went wrong is a part of the prom. So like it's like this including what can't be included kind of a move, or a productive contradiction that doesn't resolve. So then when you're in a death prom, and so I mean, I suppose the first one to try to ruin the prom would just be Carrie, and Stephen King. Maybe that's the first one. I don't know, but it's just like, okay, we're going to juxtapose this magical night with a barrel of pig's blood or whatever the hell it was that they dumped on Carrie.
Yeah, well, I don't think of the death in death prom as being necessarily violent.
Okay, yeah.
I think about it in terms
death of the prom or something like that.
No. I think about it in terms of, there's that quote which I will misquote, but like Roland Barthes talks about how every photograph is morbid because it captures a moment that's been lost in time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right. So I think there's something about hearing innocence, or what
the magic has passed, maybe
performed as innocence, right?
Okay.
That's from a totally different era, right? And then trying to reclaim it now and knowing it doesn't work anymore.
Okay, yeah.
And so I think there's something there that feels inherently morbid, even a little hellish or fever dream like, But it sounds great.
Yeah. Okay, I got you. Yeah. So now, the violence then would just. I don't mean it like. So obviously, the pig's blood is a very literal kind of violence, but I don't mean that necessarily. As the way to undermine or deterritorialize or whatever. It doesn't need to be, a physical act of violence or anything like that. So just
feel like there's
the accidents,
an utter awareness of death. Listening to a song, I know that the person singing it is dead. I know it's from a dead time, and it no longer performs in our time. And yet,
good.
It still stands as the sound of bubblegum innocence and whatever. And maybe that's generational. I'm not entirely sure. The music of our parents or something like that. But I do feel like that music has a really long shelf life compared to a lot of other music. A lot of those Phil Spector, Motown songs and stuff from the 50s and 60s that have become, I almost want to make the quote sign, I won't, but like Americana, right? And so I feel like there's a way of reclaiming it by sticking it in a time where it just doesn't perform well.
But the reclamation, so the reclamation is not what we would typically call nostalgia, because if it was anything, it was like a kind of a more inclusive way of looking back, because the typical kind of nostalgia excludes all the things that went wrong. You just remember the magic of your prom or whatever. Whereas the type of nostalgia, if it is nostalgia, maybe it's just like a brand new concept, the death prom. It is remembering that is more inclusive of the death. So this is a time supposedly of you're in the prime of your life, this magical night, and then everything else is just kind of like dying after that or whatever. So now you're looking back at it from the present moment in which you're half dead relative to the prom, and so all that dying is a part of the included in the concept now, and so it becomes this sort of like eerie, haunting. Remember this innocence that is now lost,
and
or
it's all heard. I mean, there's a ton of reverb in those songs already, right? And so automatically that makes it sound kind of spectral. And as far as the secondary naivete and then having this interesting remainder that feels generative or whatever, it made me wonder if willful ignorance can lead to that. I don't think it can, but the reason that came to mind is because the reason I use so much reverb in Midnight Radio is because I can't match beats for shit. And so just letting every song sort of disintegrate into the next one just was an easy tactic for me.
Again, making a limitation
more
a
reverb,
feature.
add more and more. But there's this kind of fog that overlays the entire thing, which has become a genre with,
Well, we grew up on sample-based music, and so what happens in sample-based music? The bad kind is very obvious, and you remember it, and it just is like some kind of recreation of the same song. The good kind of sample-based music, when it's collage and it's really putting things differently and chopping them up in all kinds of different ways, you get this it's not nostalgia in the pure sense, but it's like this. Wow, there's this new way of thinking about the past. It just rearranges the past in a way that makes it shows all the virtuality. So we think of the past as closed, but it shows there's all this virtuality. So in the past, and so it opens up this space as death does actually. So this is a very famous thing with being and non-being. The spaciousness of being to become is non-being, is death, and so it is this idea that I don't know. Here's a Heideggerian way of putting it. Me imagining next to the void, so the non-being, being, determinate being next to non-being, we have this indeterminate void, and the relation between determinacy and indeterminacy is this open space in which you can create new things, even with things that were at one point determined, but in every present moment, that determination becomes less and less, depending on how much virtuality you can discover through concepts and through your imagination or whatever. So there's concepts that are closed, we call those concepts as a mold, and then there are concepts that are repetitions with difference. So
yeah, that just led me to maybe a sort of bleak thought, but that there, as of right now in the year of our Lord 2026, I don't feel, and I know I'm saying this as a middle-aged dude, but I don't feel like there are new forms of music where I want to hear something where I cover my ears like my parents did, and I'm like, that's not music. You know, that's the sign of a healthy culture, right? Not having whatever Kate Bush, Top Gun remakes, all these things still hitting the charts. That just feels like stasis. If there aren't new forms, maybe there are now only new forms of remembering, new ways of remembering, new ways of relitigating and recombining
which
the past.
actually makes the future new too.
Right. But that's not. There's going to be another movement like punk or hip hop or techno or.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe that because again, like the thing is like a lot of those again we can remember them as like punk, for example. If we remember it like a concept as a mold, it was defined in these ways. But what was interesting about it is there was a lot of concept remembering in punk, but remembering it in a different way. So I know you don't like them, but I do. The Cramps, are playing, or the Ramones or whoever are playing rock and roll songs. Famously in the Cramps, it's a rockabilly, that's what it's called. But they played it all reverby and and vamped up, and they're all dressed up and acting crazy and taking the Elvis vocal but like making it extra echoey and whatever. And so like now and it's not making fun of that music, but it's like redoing it, but redoing it with difference. So that's a concept plus a difference. So that maybe a lot of those genres, somebody could come along and say, hey, nothing's new under the sun, because punk is just garage rock, like psychedelic rock that didn't ever make it out of the garage or whatever. And so like you could say that. I think with anything.
But it was speaking. I think what was new is that it was speaking to a very specific psychosocial, political, geographic moment.
Okay, yeah. Develop that a little bit for me.
I'm not as familiar with punk. I mean, the rough shape.
Well, just use a different example.
Or techno is machine music that made a lot of sense in post-industrial Detroit.
Machine music with soul.
But you had all these empty warehouses. Just those drums sounded amazing in there. It sounded holy. But it was specific to a moment in Detroit where there was a DJ named the Electrifying Mojo. This certain moment that couldn't be manufactured or willed, but that just was responding to the needs of the crowd at that particular time. I guess I'm mourning the loss of a fixed kind of temporal scene, right? Because now we just have everything at once, which again, I'm hanging on to as my way of getting through the 21st century. Is just, it's not better or worse, it's just different. It's great that we have access to so much stuff, and even though there aren't new styles or scenes or a sense of belonging to a particular artistic ethos, individually there's so much more amazing music that I've heard in the past year than before. So
that's
just fragmentation.
But what people do with new music now, as you said, because of algorithms and whatnot, is it's like got to have these labels or whatever, and so like everything's going to be described in terms of those labels. Like
it always has been, right?
Yeah, I mean, but maybe I was just trying to say that maybe you were trying to or maybe I'm thinking the understanding that these labels were actually new at the time. So it wasn't just a mix of other labels. So it was like, okay, we're going to give this thing a totally new label or whatever.
We've definitely got that. I mean, there's like goblin core, witch house, cottage core, whatever. I feel like people are making micro genres constantly, but it's not
but it's within
moving
a defined
the needle.
Genre.
And it's not rejecting an identifiable mainstream, right? So you have like disco and then punk and then like hip hop, and then you can almost see this cultural conversation happening of the underground gets defanged, it becomes mainstream, we get sick of that, fuck it, we do something new,
capital capture, whatever.
Right. And just say that wheel no longer works. It doesn't seem like something that should be mourned either.
Got you. So let's continue on with this theory, but do your track list for Death Prom.
I don't remember it offhand.
All right, okay, well, vamp while I'm doing this, I guess.
Probably the Ronettes, Keep on Dancing, I'm pretty sure. I feel like that. Oh, and then of course Dirty Beaches. Oh, okay. Okay. Yep. Starts off with Dirty Beaches, doing Lord Knows Best, which is, I think, using a loop from the Ronettes, or maybe that's the Francoise Hardy. It doesn't matter. But yeah, it's this music. I think he's from Taiwan, made this album in Vancouver, imagining Americana. I think now he's back in Taiwan doing very, very experimental music. The Laredos, Now the Partying Begins, Detroit Soul, that is great. Annie Ray, Bang Bang Ranggek from Indonesia, which, I mean, I'm not familiar with her whole oeuvre, but there's a lot of really great music from Asia where they were really trying to create that sort of sound of 60s AM radio. So it's like, you know, when things do become synthesized, you know, I think that's where it gets a lot more interesting. And then, of course, the urtext for Death Prom as a modern mode is Suicide Surrender.
Suicide on both the first two soundtracks. So
yeah,
this is
an
an important thing.
But
Yeah.
then I became conscious of that, and I think I waited a year before I played another Suicide song.
Really? Okay. All right.
I will make the case that they're more important than the Velvet Underground.
And the
this is not
writing on
that
this
show.
one is mostly about what we were trying to talk about, the concept of the prom, death prom, those two things, put together.
Yes.
Right.
I have 3 criteria. Time is a factor, so listening to Roy Orbison in 1961 is not Death Prom at all.
Yeah, it's primary naivete.
Yeah. But listening to it in a motel in 2026 and hearing it through the walls, just a Roy Orbison song, that's very Death Prom.
Yeah.
But you can't listen to it as it's meant to be heard. There's always a sense of dread.
Okay. Yeah.
But again, not horror, just more existential
I
jitters.
think of it, now, you feel free to reject this, I think of that particular kind of dread in this liminal sort of space that you create on the radio as about an openness to possibility, because you are, creating new possibilities, I think, as you bring things back, but bring them back differently. And so I would put it next to sublimity to some degree, because, sublimity is this vertiginous, awareness of possibility or freedom or whatever, that's almost too much. So there's a kind of horror to me that's the the monstrosity of our own possibilities, just the infinite freedom there. So anyway,
nice.
Okay. that was number 2.
Yeah, that was number 2, Dread. And then I think the third thing is that the ultimate Death Prom is a long dead one-hit wonder, like the Laredos, or just this record that kind of continues to circulate, but you're not quite sure how to locate it.
Yeah,
or
and
that
you said it was Detroit,
text.
because Detroit has this music history, and a lot of people would think of the Detroit techno as a really interesting kind of secondary naivete. There's the the Motown history is of soul tracks like that. I mean, there's also a lot of country records were recorded in Detroit. There was it was a big recording place, and of course it was this optimized sort of city of the future. We build the cars that are gonna drive you straight into the future.
Have you had this experience? You're just at the supermarket or a mall or whatever where they're playing music, and you're I know this song, and you know the lyrics, and you're I never intentionally listened to this song. I have no fucking idea who made it. And yet it's in my head and I already know how it goes, right? A lot of that AM radio stuff. And I think that's what's really interesting is when did that get absorbed? And then when I'm trying to think about who made it or when it's from, there's a total slippage of time and context. And that gets really interesting.
Is this the whole vaporwave thing, which we'll probably talk about some other time? But
I'm really not sure what vaporwave is, so I'm not going to comment.
I just dead mall music, so it's Death Prom, Dead Mall, whatever.
Yeah, but I feel that energy's been around for a long time. So
yeah, it's just the eeriness of Muzak, playing in the elevator or whatever.
Right? Yeah. Those records that would take Japanese recordings of American elevator music and then slow it way down. Again, I love that. It just goes through this thrasher, of different cultural time modes, and then just comes out as something that becomes completely not alien, but feels again, I can't place when this is from or even when it was made. which again, I guess feels like different ways of remembering the past or dealing with the past rather than envisioning the future. Because I would still hold, and I have a couple episodes dedicated to this, and I know it's partially, it's so hard to separate being middle-aged and nostalgic, which is just inherently natural, and I'm trying to resist it, versus making arguments like techno music in the mid-1990s, especially like all those artificial intelligence comps, the Aphex Twin, Autechre, Boards of Canada. No, Boards of Canada was looking backward, I think. But I feel like there was this sound.
You don't need to qualify it.
No, but because they were using samples. That's all.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
gotcha.
That's all.
Yeah.
But there's this like very optimistic sound in the music of like, whoa, it's going to be the year 2000 and, we're all going to be connected on the World Wide Web. There's an optimism to it, that I think cannot be recreated today.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
It was very forward-looking.
I still think like straight off the bat, there was sinisterness as was a part of it. I'm fine with the artificial intelligence compilations from Warp; those were, but I think Boards of Canada also.
That's what I'm
on
saying.
Warp,
That's why I excise them. I don't want to go down this road with you.
Oh, okay. We're in total agreement as usual. We always agree.
Always agree. Yeah.
So yeah, that's good. All right. Well, I think we're wrapping up here.
Midnight.
Radio.